Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. So your interview that you did with, is it Shalom TV? It's on YouTube.
Yeah, you're showing the fact that you're not Jewish. Shalom TV, yeah.
Shalom TV, yeah. Well, it was interesting because my husband had actually found the interview, and so we had watched it a few months ago, and I was thinking, actually, at the end of the rosary, I should have done the prayer, because I think you had said that she likes the prayer, "O Mary, conceived without sin." Am I right on that?
O Mary, conceived without sin, pray for us who have recourse to thee.
Yeah. Would you mind giving them just a little background on, prior to, you were an atheist before, and kind of the shortened version?
Tell me, sure, no problem. But I've never met you before. What's the time format, basically? I don't want to launch into something that's going to take, a half hour. We have 5 minutes, so just tell me what's going on.
Oh yeah, no. We probably have like 10 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. And they can also go learn more and watch more too on that video. So.
Oh yeah. By the way, let me show a little of my background as a marketing professional. I mean, if people are interested, right? I do have a website, salvationisfromthejews.com. Sure. I have a weekly radio show on Radio Maria on Saturday afternoons. It's a live call-in show, 3 to 4 Eastern time on Radio Maria. And I have a YouTube channel, and as you know, if you've seen that video, one can get sick of me rather easily because there's, dozens or hundreds of hours of stuff, my talks and stuff up on YouTube. Yeah. But anyway, let me just recollect myself where to start. I was born and raised Jewish. I consider myself still Jewish. I consider myself a Jew in the Catholic Church. That's another topic. But if you look at Romans chapter 11, it's clear from St. Paul that there's a mystery to the way the church, in between the first coming of Christ and the second coming of Christ, will be composed of Jew and Gentile in the church. So that's my defense for saying that. There's another good reason for saying that, which is that I do work with a lot of Jews trying to encourage their entry into the church. And one of the issues there is that no Jew can imagine ever not being Jewish. I mean, it's just such a deep part of the identity. So if you tell a Jew you have to stop being Jewish and become a Catholic, they're just going to walk away. That's just like, it's an insurmountable hurdle. But if you explain to them that the church is composed of Jew and Gentile, and they're not less Jewish by entering the church, they're actually more Jewish, since Jesus was the Jewish Messiah, and they're just becoming a follower of the Jewish Messiah, who started the church as, in some sense, as an offspring of Judaism, and actually as a sect of Judaism is what it looked like at first. And the only reason it looks Gentile rather than Jewish is because the Jews, by and large, didn't enter in great numbers, and the Gentiles did. But that's our fault as Jews, right? It's not the Gentiles' fault for entering the church. It's our fault for dropping the ball. It makes it a lot easier for them. All of a sudden, they can imagine entering the church because they're not stopping being Jewish. That's not what you wanted me to talk about. You wanted me to give my witness testimony. But I will say one last thing, which is the Cardinal Archbishop of Paris, who passed away about 15 years ago, Cardinal Lustiger, was a Jewish convert. And he said, he explained to his father when he was baptized that baptism wouldn't make him any less Jewish at all. He was just coming into the fullness of what he had been promised as a Jew. So that's really the attitude that every Jew in the Catholic Church has ever had, is that they're coming into the fullness of Judaism. They're not stopping being Jewish. Anyway, but I didn't know that, of course. So I grew up Jewish.
Yeah.
My parents were both German Jewish Holocaust refugees. I was quite devout as a child and very serious about my Judaism. And I essentially lost my faith when I went to university, MIT. I lost my faith in God and thought, you can't in good conscience believe that God exists, the pseudoscientific worldview. And so I left. By the time I got out of MIT, I was essentially atheist. I went on to Harvard Business School. I did well enough there to become asked to join the faculty when I graduated. So I found myself a professor of marketing at Harvard at 29. And that was the beginning of my witness testimony, because that's when the bottom fell out of my world, because I knew there has to be a real meaning and purpose to life. As a child, I thought that would come from entering into a personal relationship with God, which I thought would happen at my bar mitzvah, which is like the Catholic confirmation. It didn't happen at my bar mitzvah, and so it was a very sad day for me. Then I decided the real meaning of my life would come when I got a driver's license, or when I began university, or when I began my career and so forth. But the problem was that at this point I was more successful than I had ever expected to be, but life still had no meaning or purpose. We're just a chemical accident. We live, there's no pattern to anything. We die, that's it. So it actually was the deepest depression of my life at that point, because I was nothing I could imagine could give my life meaning at that point. And in that, I was walking in nature one morning. I had my first theophany, the biggest, actually by far the biggest mystical experience of my life. I was just walking along, lost in my thoughts, as atheist essentially, when the curtain between the physical world and the spiritual world disappeared. And I found myself in the presence of God, very knowingly in the presence of God, in a state of very deep, intimate communication with God, and seeing my life and understanding my life as I would understand it after I died, and was looking back over my life in the presence of God. And I saw everything the way I would see it then. So I saw that my two greatest regrets when I died would be all the time and energy I had worried about wasted worrying about not being loved, when every moment of my existence I was held in an ocean of love greater than I ever imagined could exist, coming from this all-knowing, all-loving God. And the other great regret would be every hour I had wasted doing nothing of value in the eyes of heaven. I saw it's all true. I saw we live forever. I saw that every action has a moral content that's weighed in the balance and recorded for all eternity. That every time we take advantage of an opportunity to do something of value in the eyes of heaven, we will very literally be rewarded for it for all eternity. And every opportunity that we let go slip by will be a lost opportunity for all eternity. I was totally selfish at the time. I was a marketing professor at Harvard, right? So that's obviously a graduate training in selfishness. And I saw in this experience, I didn't see what was wrong about being selfish, but I saw I had been stupid and selfish all my life, putting my effort into things which wouldn't do me any good at all, even 100 years later when I was dead. When if I wanted to be smart and selfish, the only thing that made sense was to essentially try to build up as much treasure in heaven while we're down here on earth, from which we will benefit very literally 100 million years from now. So the net present value calculation was pretty obvious. And when I went back to Cambridge, I was no longer interested in anything which I wouldn't benefit me 100 million years from now. So I basically, all I wanted to do was pursue this experience. I didn't know who this God was, what religion it was. So every night before falling asleep, I would say a short prayer that I had made up to know the name of my Lord and Master and God who had revealed himself to me. And a year later, I went to sleep, and I thought I was woken by a hand gently on my shoulder and led to a room and left alone with the most beautiful young woman I could ever imagine. I knew without being told it was the Blessed Virgin Mary. And when I found myself in her presence, all I wanted to do was fall on my knees and somehow honor her appropriately. And by far the biggest, I mean, it was, as perfectly beautiful as she was to look at, even more profoundly moving was the beauty of her voice.
Yeah.
The only way I can describe it is that her voice was made up out of that which makes music music. And when she spoke, this incredibly beautiful voice flowed through my soul, carrying with it her love. And that was actually the biggest part of the experience, because to feel the purity and the intensity of the love from her flowing through me was to lift me up into a state of ecstasy greater than I ever imagined could exist. And first thing she said to me was she offered to answer any questions I might have for her. So I asked her about 5 or 6 or 7 questions, which tragically we don't have time to go into now, but you can always check it out on my website.
Oh my God, it's so good. Yeah.
But anyway, I asked her 5 or 6 questions, and which she graciously answered. Sometimes she answered a little bit sideways. Sometimes I pushed her a little bit and got her to answer a little less sideways. And after the questions and answers, she spoke to me for another 10 or 15 minutes. The audience is over. I went back to sleep. When I woke up the next morning, I was hopelessly in love with the Blessed Virgin Mary. In fact, my first thought when I woke up was, oh boy, I can't wait to go to sleep again tonight and see her again. I never imagined that it wouldn't happen again, but it didn't.
Right, right.
And I knew all I wanted. I knew it was Christ in that first experience after the experience of Mary. And I knew that I wanted to be as fully and completely a Christian as possible. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know the difference between a Protestant and a Catholic. There wasn't much I could do other than open a local phone book and start going to a local church, which is Protestant. But as soon as I got to know the pastor a little bit, I kind of asked him shyly, what about the Blessed Virgin Mary? And when he answered without the respect that I knew that she deserved, I knew this is no place for me. And so that's basically what led me to Catholic Church, was knowing who the Blessed Virgin Mary was and knowing who Christ was and so forth.
Yeah.
So that's it in a nutshell.
I mean, yeah, I think I watched the part of the interview with where Mary came to you in your sleep. I think I watched that like 4 or 5 times. But so when you say that we are here on earth to build up our treasure in heaven.
I didn't say that.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sorry. I'm sorry. But the problem is, first of all, I'm pedantic by nature, but also when you're talking about the things of God, I don't want to be held responsible for having apparently said something I didn't say. So that's not what we're on earth for. That's a side effect of being on earth. We're on earth to love and serve God, not to look after our own interests in heaven. However, it is in our own interest to love and serve God.
Okay. So really it's that every hour, every day, we want God to be top of mind, right? Or we want to be loving and serving God all the time, as much as possible. Maybe. It is
the most sensible way to spend your time, yes. And your energy.
Yes.
And of course, you're a mother, taking care of your children and raising them is serving God and so forth. So it doesn't mean, we're all monks.
Yeah.
But we should live every moment to the best of our ability, which is of course impossible, in the presence of God. In other words, aware that God is watching us and aware that he is responding to us. And whenever there is an opportunity to do something which is of value in his eyes, which can obviously simply be a mental prayer or an expression of love or doing your daily duty with out of a love of God and service to God, we should take advantage of that. And in fact, a side effect of that is 100 million years from now, we'll benefit from having done that.
It's so beautiful. I always think of God as it's a relationship. Like I just want to be in relationship with him all the time. So everything I do, if I can thank him or I'm sorry, that's how I viewed it. It more is like this, especially you almost want to be in prayer all the time. Like everything you do is love.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So people are asking. So you guys, I will share all of his information after, like his website, his book, where you can find him, because they're gonna want to come find you. But what is the title of the book?
First of all, my first book, it's not just the book, but I have 2 relatively big books. They're both published by Ignatius Press, which is, a pretty reputable Catholic publisher.
Yes.
The first one is Salvation is from the Jews, the role of Judaism in salvation history from Abraham to the Second Coming. And that's what it is. It's written, it's not written as a scholarly or academic book. I mean, it's written, the truth is, the confession, I'm a member of a rosary group in my hometown, which is a fishing town. And all the other members of the rosary group, none of them have anything more than a high school education. They're fishermen's wives, essentially, and also a day laborer. And whenever I would write a chapter of the book, I would circulate it among them to make sure that, it wasn't over their heads, and I would, make sure, change things so that it was perfectly understandable. However, it is theology. It's the role of Judaism in salvation history from a Catholic perspective. And my second book is Honey from the Rock, 16 Jews Find the Sweetness of Christ. And that's a collection of 16 Jewish to Catholic witness testimonies, Jews who enter the Catholic Church, always as a result of miraculous interventions. Some of your, whatever you call them, viewers might know Mother Miriam, the former Rosalind Moss. She's one of the stories in there. I'm one of the stories in there, but there are a bunch of other Jews who have entered the Catholic Church stories in there. So those are the two books.
Okay, perfect. And I'll make sure I share those too. So when did you become part of the Rosary group with the men in your town, or when did you start? When was like your first impression of the Rosary? Like, do you remember? That's typically always our first.
Oh boy, I'm not going to make any friends. I'll tell you, the first time I heard the Rosary, I used to go to a Marian shrine near my house to Our Lady of La Salette. This is in Massachusetts. And I used to, this was before I was Catholic, but just to feel Mary's presence, and to commune with her. And I remember being there once and hearing these two older Catholic women saying the Rosary. And I gotta admit, I thought, oh, this must be so abrasive to the Blessed Virgin Mary's ears. They were saying it like angrily. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. And I just thought, boy, if I was God, I'd have, cotton in my ears.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, that was my first exposure to the Rosary. So.
Yeah.
And that's something else. I mean, we talked about basically trying to be in the presence of God. But clearly, when you're saying the Rosary, it would be nice to be saying the Rosary as though God was at the other end and the Blessed Virgin Mary was actually hearing you pray to her instead of that you're fulfilling an unpleasant duty or something.
Right. That's funny, though. Yeah, we've heard so many amazing stories about people's first impressions of the Rosary. So many from grandparents, they would see their grandparents on their knees at 3:00 in their bedroom or out in the open. It's just the stories that really have come from here have been really, really beautiful. And Mary just brings together the best people too. So this has been so great. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, well, thanks for having me, and thanks everybody for the 500 people who joined our Rosary.
Yeah, are you still teaching marketing?
No. I lost all interest in that right away. I teach as an adjunct, which means part-time. I teach theology. I've taught at Holy Apostles College and Seminary in Connecticut and at Ave Maria University in Naples, Florida.
Yeah. And
as I said, I write and I have the radio show and I give a lot of talks and missions and retreats and stuff.
Yeah.
Until this China virus business.
I know.
On that.
I know, but come join us any day. We do it every day. So.
Okay. Well, anyway, thanks for doing this.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. It was so nice to meet you. What a gift. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye. God bless.
Yeah. Have a great Thursday.